Being 5:15, I'd like to call the Board of Public Works Monday, June 2nd meeting to order. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call has been taken. Any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Looking for no change. I'm looking for a motion.
So move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Barrington, second by Mr. Ritchie to adopt the agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Public input. Any public input? Just one more time for public input. Being none, we'll close that. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Ritchie, second by Mr. Barrington to approve the May 5th meeting minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're carried. Wastewater treatment plan updates. Ben?
Good afternoon. Because we got a long night, I'm gonna go through basically just the high points here. In your packet, there is the 2024 Compliance Maintenance Annual Report that needs to be approved by the board so that we can have a resolution done at the council meeting, because that needs to be submitted to the DNR by the 30th. So we got an A again. But unfortunately, as Mike is going to go through with his presentation, we're not going to be able to meet the phosphorus limits, and he's going to go in depth on the report that's in this packet. But does anybody have any questions on the CMAR report that you have?
Why don't you finish up your report and then we can, it's the next thing on the agenda item, so.
Okay. So basically the rest of this is basically just what Mike is gonna go over with the report. So does anybody have any questions, or we'll just wait for when he's giving his presentation?
Any further questions for Ben? Seeing none. Thanks, Ben. We'll move on to the next line, which is kind of all together. Approve and recommend 2024 CMAR resolution. Ben or Robert?
This is pretty much standard form, what we submitted in the past. It is talking about the CMAR report, and at the back it needs the approval of this resolution to be submitted. As Ben indicated, they have scored all A's in all sections as of now. So this is nothing more than a formality that we have done in the past with the CMAR report.
Any questions on that? Anybody? See no questions. I'm looking for motion.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Barrington, second by Mr. Ritchie to approve and recommend 2024 CMAR resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Thanks, Robert. Next, presentation of preliminary compliance alternative plan for the wastewater treatment facility by Mike Gerbitz from Donahue and Associates, INC. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. You have a lot of reading material in your packets. There's a very large PCAP report, which is Preliminary Compliance Alternatives Plan. And the intent here tonight is to give you an executive summary of that, kind of give you the, I guess, the key points of that for your consideration and any questions or comments that you have
At any time, please, I'm hoping that this can be kind of an informal presentation. Ask questions, stop me, interrupt me at any point in time if you want to follow up with the comment. Please do so. The PCAP report is a DNR requirement. It's in your permit that governs that wastewater treatment facility. It's something that you're required to submit by the end of the month, of this month. And it's important to understand that this report isn't saying what you're going to do. It's looking at alternatives that would allow you to comply with that permit and giving you the information you need to make smart subsequent steps, define what your next steps would be to be on the path towards compliance by July 1, 2029. So tonight, we're not making any decisions. Here's what we're going to do. We're really informing you all what the nature of this issue is, what it means from a cost perspective, what it means for that facility. And we're recommending you submit the report and then recommending a course of events, some steps that you would take from tonight moving forward so that when that date comes, July 1, 2029, you will in fact be in compliance. Now, wastewater is not a very interesting topic for some, but it's an important one. If we look at any community, maybe take the schools out, it's really the most valuable piece of infrastructure in any community. And the costs are significant. They're substantial at any community. And to put a frame of reference, and we'll get to it later, but if you had decided you were going to build a brand new plant outside of town, that's a $90 million to $100 million proposition. So it's an important conversation and it's an important piece of infrastructure. And I look forward to walking through that report so you don't have to read all 200 pages. But who am I? I'm Mike Gerbitz, but I'm a senior process engineer with a company called Donahue and Associates. We've been working at your facility, in various capacities since 2012. The company I work for, Donahue and Associates, we're a specialized wet infrastructure firm. And most of our work, about 80% of our work, is in wastewater treatment. We're a specialized wastewater treatment firm that really works at facilities of all sizes, from the very largest here in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Madison, Kenosha, La Crosse, and the list goes on. It's up on the screen. But we also work at some of the very smallest. We work at a lot of medium-sized facilities like New London. And I think it's just important to set the stage that we're not a consulting firm that does a lot of things and we kind of dabble in wastewater. This is the core of our business. 80% of our work is in the wastewater industry. We're really a wastewater engineering firm. And we're one of the 20 largest wastewater treatment firms in the country. So wastewater is what we do. And we have all the disciplines in-house. We're headquartered in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. We're a Wisconsin-based firm. And we have all the different disciplines we need to do wastewater projects. We're process engineers, which is what I am, to structural engineers, electrical, HVAC, mechanical. And right here in the upper Midwest, we have one of the largest concentrations of wastewater treatment plants, of wastewater treatment professionals in the upper Midwest. So we're going to be talking about some strategies that are going to cost real money, and I think it's important for you guys to understand this is what we do. We're a firm that specializes in this. So why are we here tonight? Reason we're here tonight really stems from EPA's approval way back in 2020 when they approved the total maximum daily load for the Upper Fox Wolf River Basin that the DNR submitted to the EPA back in 2020. EPA approved it February 27th, 2020. And that TMDL establishes how much total suspended solids, how much solids and how much phosphorus the different dischargers in that watershed can discharge to that watershed. Okay? They give everyone, they allocate waste load allocation, they allocate how many pounds everybody gets. And unfortunately, New London doesn't get enough so that you can't do nothing. You can't meet the phosphorus limit that they established for you. You get a mere 3.3 pounds per day as a 6-month average. You look at how much you discharge over those 6 months, take the average, that needs to be below 3.3 pounds per day. Your facility cannot reliably do that. Doesn't have the technology required to meet a limit that's that low. Your facility does remarkably well. For a facility like that without filtration, you average 0.4 milligrams per liter. It's remarkably good. You're an A student year after year in your CMER, but the technology is not there. You need a filtration step to meet these limits. It could be as low as, could be half of that, 0.2, 0.25, something like that. And therefore, you have to do something. You have to build something to allow you to meet this new limit. Okay? That's why we're here tonight. And that's why you have to submit this PCAP, this report. So the permit that governs that facility has a number of compliance deadlines, steps you have to take. This is all in your permit. At the end, by the end of May, you have to submit this report or a version of this report, okay? Then by the end of June of 2027, this is what the permit says, you have to submit your final compliance alternative plan. That's the one that says, here's what we're gonna do. Here's how we're gonna meet that limit, okay? This report is a preliminary report. Next year, by June of next year, you need to submit the report that says, here's how we're gonna meet that limit. Then by June of 27, you need to submit plans and specs. Here's the plans and specs, the engineering drawings and the engineering specifications for what we're going to build. The permit says you need to submit that in 2027, and then you ultimately, you need to build these improvements and have them running by the end of June of 29. So we're at the beginning of these of the schedule that we're showing here. That's in your permit. I think it's really important to point out that the DNR, this is what they've required. They require you to do, but it's really not a well-conceived construction schedule. If you submit plans and specs by June of 27, you need to wait till you get DNR approval. Then you need to bid it, you need to award it. It doesn't leave the contractor really enough time today to build something. And so you really need to move. We would recommend you move faster than this. And we're showing that here, and we talked about it in the report. I think it's important to start with the compliance deadline and work backwards from there. So that's what we're doing in this bottom chart. And the blue bars are representing what we would recommend so that you can go about this comfortably without increased costs. If you limit the engineer and how much time they have, you're not going to get as much input from y'all and staff and come up with the right configuration and the right project. Then you're going to push the contractor, and that's going to add risk to the contractor. And what's the solution to risk? Money. He's going to put more money in his bids. And if you wait too long and you go, you wait till the final, the last minute, you may not get all your funding in order. And so the top schedule is what DNR requires. We recommend you follow something more like, there's some flexibility here, but something more like what we're showing in the bottom. So let's work backwards from there. We think for a major construction project, anything north of $10 million today, it takes so long to get equipment today, materials and fabricated equipment, that we think 30 months is a more realistic schedule. So if we work backwards from this point D, 30 months, that brings us to here, beginning of 27, it looks like. If we put 3 months to bid it and award it to the contractor, that puts us here in 26. If you want a year for design, so that you get the right project, you do your right research, you get the right input from staff, you go look at other facilities that are operating, and you take what you like and what you don't like from that. That requires, let's say, a year. That means by sometime this year, you should be under in design. We're showing here September. That's just how the math works, goes backwards. The point is, this probably should be the summer of phosphorus here within the city of New London, where we're on this phosphorus topic and we stay on it and continue to make progress so that you've got the time you need to do the project, whatever project it is, you've got time to do it right. There's one exception to that, and I'll talk about that later. There's a way to kind of buy some time. But if you're going to build something, use the time. We suggest you use the time that you have so that you get the funding and you don't overspend on this project, because all these issues, the city owns them and they're not going away. And it's wise to be proactive and continue to make progress and use the time that you have. Any questions about that? I think it's a really important point, that it's important to just keep moving on this. So we're here tonight because of a TMDL that was approved by EPA in 2020, and it gives you a low-level phosphorus limit, but there's other issues at your facility. And we think before you spend money to solve the phosphorus issue, you should take a step back and make sure you look holistically at the facility so that every dollar that you're investing today is well invested for tomorrow. It's well invested for the next 20 years and beyond. And avoid having tunnel vision so that you spend money that you regret later, that solves the phosphorus issue in the near term, but you regret that expenditure because you didn't broaden your view and look holistically at the facility. And so this report does that. It looks at strategies to only solve the phosphorus issue, but it looks holistically at what do we need to do with this aging facility? Because it's an old facility, what do we need to do to make sure we're spending money today wisely for the next 20 years and beyond? And you'll hear me probably at different times talk about 20 years. I'll say, oh, make sure you're spending the money wisely for 20 years and beyond. These are multi-generational projects. That facility has been there a long time. The improvements that you're going to make, you want to get 20 years, 40 years, possibly 60 years out of that investment. But I use 20 years a lot because that's what EPA requires and DNR requires. They require you to look at a generation at a time, a 20-year horizon. And so the PCAP does that, looks at the 20-year horizon. Okay. But it's an old facility, and so we're showing you an aerial view of your facility with color coding. The orange structures are 58 to 71 years old today. Okay, they'll be 20 years older in the future. These are the ages today. Most of your facility is about 40 years old, 38 years old. Most of your structures are yellow. And then you got a handful of newer ones that are less than that. But it's safe to say most of your facility is 40 years old in round numbers or older. Okay. So it's an old, the point is it's an aging facility. And really, the major pieces of equipment, and the facility is well maintained, and they've taken care of a lot and replaced, ancillary components, but the major process components, the major process equipment there is shown on this graph. On the horizontal axis down at the bottom, these are all the different structure numbers. If you remember, we numbered these structures. Here's the different structures on this axis, and the age of the major process equipment is shown on the vertical axis. This is the age today. And this is how old the stuff will be at the end of the 20-year, keeps talking about 20 years, the end of that 20-year planning period. And the take home here is most of your big major process equipment is at end of life. It's, it's kind of remarkable. Some of it's lasted this long, and you're going to see it later tonight. But the take home is your structures are old, but more troubling is the fact that a lot of the major pieces of equipment have really exceeded their typical useful life. Okay? And this report looks at how are we going to get through the next 20 years. And then finally, you have one of the most complicated facilities in the state. This is a schematic representation of your treatment plant. And it's not an exaggeration. Milwaukee's isn't this complicated on the liquid train. You have more unit processes, you pump it 3 times. This is a very unique flow train. The way we treat the water is very unique and it's very complicated. It's got a lot of different unit processes. Complexity in itself isn't bad. There's a time and place for it, but this plant was configured and built over the years when you had industry that's no longer here. So this complexity is really not necessary for the service area today and the service and likely what the service area will be over the next 20 years. Those big food processor loadings are not probably coming back. They're not here today and they're probably not going to come back. And so this plant really isn't configured very well for the service area today or, you know, future generations. It's a very complicated and complex facility. Okay, does that make sense? So this PCAP documents an evaluation of feasible alternatives to number 1, first and foremost, meet the phosphorus limit, and then 2, as I said, maintain compliance for the next 20 years. How do you get another generation of service out of there? This facility, and it's not the final plan. It's a preliminary engineering report. Preliminary is the key word. And it's hopefully lays out a well-conceived strategy for you to move forward and continue to make progress on this important issue. Okay, so the very first alternative that we looked at, and you always have to look at, is what if we did not establish that that's not an option? You have to do something. So the second alternative that we looked at is a way to deal with only the phosphorus issue. And it's called the multi-discharger variance. It's a program that the DNR set up to help some communities. Not all are eligible for the MDV, but it appears that New London would be because of your median household income and other factors. The way to think of this alternative is it buys you time. It's a variance. It's not a forever solution. It's a regulatory solution that buys you time. And the way to think about that is you buy compliance for a number of years. Okay. And on average, it would cost you about $69,000 a year. You would pay for the phosphorus that goes over the limit, pay for every pound that goes over the limit. That money would go to some water conservation department. It's usually the county. I think it would probably be the county here. So they take that annual payment and they go out they use that money to go out in the watershed and make improvements out in the watershed, put in buffer strips around agricultural operations, fencing, things that would prevent phosphorus out in the watershed, prevent phosphorus from getting into the watershed. Okay. And in theory, it's a great idea. It's too bad it doesn't work forever, because in theory, you spend less and maybe do more. You know, you could actually get more pounds out by solving land use problems out in the watershed. But they don't make this a forever solution. They give you what we're showing here in this bullet. If you qualify for the MDV, you get it for 3 permit terms. A permit term is 5 years, so you could get it for 15 years, or until the program expires, whichever comes sooner. As we sit here today, the MDV is set to expire in 2027. You're one of the last communities in the state to deal with the phosphorus issue, one of the very last. One of the other ones is Oshkosh, and we're helping Oshkosh. They're building some filters. So the MDV program was set up a long time ago, and a number of facilities around the state have used it, but it expires in 2027 as we sit here today. That's the plan, February of 2027. However, it's been successful and the DNR has proposed extending it to 2035. So best case scenario is if EPA approves that extension, you could use this to buy some time from 2029 to 2035. Okay. That's the best case scenario. Does that make sense? Okay. And the last bullet, just a reminder, it would only deal with the phosphorus issue. The other alternatives, we wanted to true them up and say, how would this facility meet the phosphorus limit and deal with this aging facility, the aging condition of the facility? So the very first one, or the first kind of holistic alternative is number 4. It would add effluent filtration, and then it would upgrade the rest of the facility, or all the facility, parts of the facility, which is most of it, that have not been upgraded in the recent past. So what's shown in, I guess they tell me that's cyan, that kind of bluish green. That shading represents structures and processes that would be upgraded. And then right here, we would rip out the rock media trickling filter that's not used today. And there we would build, because it's the only place where we can build it, we would put effluent filtration there. Okay, and these filters, they've been used around the state a lot of places to meet a low level phosphorus limit. They're like a coffee filter. They're made out of plastic, or the more reliable ones are some sort of plastic media. The water comes through it just like a coffee filter, and it sweeps out the particulate phosphorus. It just removes the chunks of phosphorus, if you will. We would build that structure right here again, because it's the only place we could. And then we would upgrade the rest of the facility. What are the advantages of this alternative? Number 1, you could phase this. Okay, you decide you don't want to upgrade the whole facility. Let's prioritize it. Let's do a project. Let's do phase 1, phase 2, maybe phase 3. You could phase this work. And number 2, if you did it all at once, it's the lowest cost alternative, you'll see. But it's only the lowest cost alternative if you do it all at once, because of the economies of scale. And nothing will be cheaper than it is today. And construction costs tend to outpace inflation costs, or outpace median household income. So it's the lowest cost alternative. You decide you're going to do everything now. If you're kind of in a perpetual state of construction, design for a year, you build for 3, then by that time it's ready to do another one. You design for a year, you build for 3. You be under construction for a long time, and then you don't get the economies of scale. So it is conducive to phasing, but there's some issues with phasing.
You say you're taking out the phosphorus. What do you do with it?
Goes in your sludge. Goes in the biosolids that get
Which
hauled
is
out to the
leach.
fields. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm just saying, you take that out, you still got to get rid of it.
you're right. And so you put that on the fields. And phosphorus is becoming more and more of a challenge for the biosolids program. And it's part of the reason that biosolids costs continue to go up, and it affects the land application rate. That you can, the rate at which you can put the biosolids on now there's more phosphorus in it. And DNR is getting more and more stringent with the amount of phosphorus you can put on the fields. There's only one alternative that deals with that issue, and that is if we make a dry pellet like Milorganite. We'll talk about that. You asked a simple question. It comes out of the water and you put it in the solids. The disadvantages, I kind of touched on some, but so you're investing in a complicated facility and you would only make it more complicated. You would add more pumping and another unit process. You would add filtration. You cannot expand this facility. This is built out. There's no room to expand capacity. This is kind of a geeky wastewater nuance, but a lot of your peers have a different type of process. You guys have what's called a fixed film process. It's that tall tower that sits up on the hill. That's a trickling filter, or it's a roughing tower. That does a great job at removing BOD. It does not very little for phosphorus and nitrogen. BOD, carbon, is the fuel to remove phosphorus and nitrogen biologically. And so it works against you when it comes to phosphorus and nitrogen removal. And someday, Minnesota already requires facilities to look at how they're going to meet a total nitrogen, how they're going to get a lot of the nitrogen completely out of the water. Not just ammonia. You don't have an ammonia limit today, but because of hypoxia, the Gulf of Mexico, regulators now are contemplating and implementing nitrogen regulations. You have the full suite of nitrogen monitoring in your permit. That's a precursor to them giving you a limit someday. Okay, so I think it's safe to say it's not if you get a nitrogen limit someday, it's a matter of when. Now, it might be 15 years from now, it might be 20 years from now. But I think it is a matter of when. And this facility is not conducive to removing, it works against you when it comes time to remove nitrogen, okay? Then it's a poor configuration for filtration. The fact that you have a fixed film process means you're gonna have to deal with some maintenance issues and some pretty unpleasant issues in the filters. You're gonna be more prone to snails and filter flies than other facilities. And then finally, it does nothing to solve your biosolids challenges today. You haul very dilute material. In other words, you haul a lot of water. When it's time for you to get rid of the material in this big tank, these are biosolids. You haul that at a pretty dilute concentration, more dilute than most. So that means you're hauling a lot of water to the fields. It's hard to get rid of biosolids today. I think your fields are 20 miles away. They're up by Freedom. Those logistics challenges will only get worse, and the costs will only increase over time. Okay, it's a viable strategy, but it's a heavily regulated, and the logistics get more and more complex year after year because of, not because of you guys, but because of agricultural practices and the DNR. So it doesn't solve any of those biosolids issues that Ben talks about in your costs going up year after year. And then here we're showing, here's your plant, and now we would add more processes to this complicated plant. We would add filtration. Now we look at several alternatives that are drastic departures from the previous one. Instead of investing in an upgrade of your existing facilities. And one thing to point out, we talked about the age of the structures here in this graphic. The pipes are the same age. And a lot of this pipe lasts, cast iron lasts 50, 60 years. The pipe is old. And so that's also a concern. And the pipe is underneath structures. It goes between structures. There's not much room between structures. That's another consideration. The age of the equipment, the age of the structures, and the age of the piping. This alternative in the next one looks at, all right, is it time to make kind of a multi-generational investment and put in a facility that addresses the shortcomings and sets the community up for expansion, growth, and changing regulations. So this alternative would be a brand new liquid, essentially a brand new plant on your existing site, okay? It would have a new liquid treatment train, and it would have a new biosolids train. There's two parts to a wastewater treatment plant. Stuff that treats the liquid, the water, and the stuff that treats and processes the solids. Alternative 5.1 looks at building a new facility on the existing site. We looked at another alternative, 5.2, that's building that new facility at a remote site, 3.7, 4 miles out of town. Because people always ask, if I'm going to spend money down here, why don't I just build a new one? You'll see why in a little bit. It adds a lot of cost. Some of the advantages to this alternative, it's simple to operate and maintain. So here we would have, you would continue to use the pumping station. That's one of your newer structures, and some of the pumps have been replaced recently. It's in very fine shape. Continue to use the pumping station. That would pump up to a new headworks a new screening building here. So you'd use this raw wastewater pumping station. You would pump up to a new screening structure here. It would go into VNR selectors. These are part of your activated sludge treatment process that would help with phosphorus removal and someday nitrogen removal. And then this would be an activated sludge basin, probably an oxidation ditch. These are the two clarifiers. I'm walking through the liquid train right now. These are two final clarifiers that would be new. And that would then, from there, the water would flow to this structure where it would be filtered, disinfected with UV, and discharged out. The biosolids would be pumped from activated sludge. They would be thickened to about 5.5 to 6%. So it's twice as thick as what you're getting to today, or half of the water that you generate today. Half of that water would be removed, so you don't have to haul it to the fields, and you would store the liquid in this tank. So it would enhance your Class B liquid biosolids program, and it would be readily expandable. This would be modular, be a modular facility, so that in the future, you could add another liquid train down here, another clarifier over here. You could expand this facility in the future to either deal with growth or more stringent effluent limits. Disadvantages, you could continue to have Class B biosolids, but it'd be less biosolids than you have historically. And then another disadvantage, always cost. It's just not one of the, it's not the cheapest alternative. Any questions on, well, here's what it would look like from a flow train perspective. Pumping, screening, a selector to enhance nutrient removal, nitrogen and phosphorus, an oxidation ditch, settling, so there's secondary clarifiers, filtration, UV and out. Biosolids, there is no simpler biosolids train available to anyone. You would take the biosolids off the clarifier, you would thicken them up with a mechanical thickening device, you would store them as liquid until they were hauled out to the fields. Very simple. This is what it would look. This is an example of a new oxidation ditch that we commissioned. This picture was taken in January of this year. This is Ionia, Wisconsin. Here's those BNR selectors. These are the tanks that help with nutrient removal. This is the activated sludge reactor here, which is an oxidation ditch, 3-ring oxidation ditch, 2 final clarifiers tucked in back here. And then there's the final building with UV disinfection. They don't have to filter, but there's provisions to add filtration in the future. And then just as just to kind of show a real world example, this is the same plant, Ixonia. The modular nature of this, if the day comes that Ixonia needs to expand their facility, they would just build kind of a mirror image liquid train up here, new oxidation ditch up here, 2 clarifiers, expand this building. And it's just highlighting the modular nature, which anybody investing real money in a facility should want it to be expandable. You guys are kind of built out your existing facility. We looked at another alternative. I'm going through this fast. Everybody good?
Yeah, better reading the whole thing.
We looked at another alternative where it's the same liquid train, exactly the same liquid train. Oxidation ditch, BNR selector, use your pump station, screens, clarifiers, UV disinfection, filtration, and out. Here we added a biosolids dryer. Okay, so it's a very, from a biosolids perspective, this alternative is very different. Now, we would remove 90% of the water in the biosolids, and we would make a dry product. And we would do that in a way that produces what's called a Class A, Class AEQ material, which means it's unregulated once you produce it. So biosolids, you'd make this Class A product, this dry product, probably pellets like Milorganite. Has anyone used Milorganite on their lawn? It would look a lot like that, and you probably wouldn't bag it and sell it to anybody, but what we've been doing in other facilities, you put it in a silo, and a local agricultural operation would say, I'll take all of it. And they would come out, take it from your facility and haul it out to their operation and use it whenever, however they want. It's no longer regulated, so no longer would you need fields. You wouldn't have to keep track of where it's going. You just say, come and get it, and you can take it for free. And your biosolids costs then go to 0. Your land application costs go to 0. Okay, and that's been proven throughout the state. In fact, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where they have a dryer, we help them put in a dryer. they actually bid out their biosolids and make a little bit of revenue, $150,000 a year or something like that. So that's the fundamental difference with this alternative is it adds drying. And we can see that here, same liquid train. Biosolids come off the clarifier, we thicken it, we hold it for a little bit for a couple weeks, and then every couple of weeks, the staff would say, now we're gonna dry the material, they would dewater it, send it through the dryer, put it in a silo. Somebody else would come and haul it away. Here's a real world example. This is an aerial view of Lake Delton, which is the Wisconsin Dells. There's their oxidation ditch, here's their clarifiers, there's those B&R selectors we were talking about, and in this building is a dryer. And that the dryer in that building is shown in this photograph right there. This is a silo. Remember I said you could dry it and put it into a silo, and then the truck would come underneath and load it out and haul it away. This is at Stevens Point, Wisconsin. That's their silo, and this is a truck after it loaded the biosolids, hauling it off to, it's not the city. One of the farmers is hauling that to his facility. There's lots of different styles of dryers. They could make a lot of different products, but this is a pelletized product that most people would want because agricultural operations, it works well in their spreaders. It's be highly desirable and it's easy to get rid of, and it would look a lot like Milorganite. So this isn't, some crazy idea that, somebody had for New London. There's been a huge proliferation of dryers throughout the state. And I think we've designed now 7 or 8 here in Wisconsin, Beloit, La Crosse, Sheboygan, Wausau, Kiel, Wisconsin has one. Kenosha has one, we designed those, but then others, River Falls is under construction. Lake Delton has had one for years. Reedsburg is putting one in. So because of the biosolids challenges that Ben has probably talked about for years, there's been a proliferation of drying here in the state. Okay, time to talk about costs. As I said, the MDV may buy you some time. It's a variance, so it's, a variance is a finite term that solves a regulatory challenge. And we would suggest, so that you have all the information in front of you, you know what you can and can't do with certainty, that we would suggest you pursue the MDV with the DNR and confirm 2 things. One, it's your eligibility. So we did what we could. We went on the DNR's website. There's a form you fill out, and median household income and watershed and all these different things, what your limits would be. And what pops out of that is, yeah, you probably are eligible. So to get confirmation, you need to work with the department, and we suggest you do that. And then number 2, how long is the variance likely to provide regulatory relief? Okay. How likely is it going to expire in 27? Are they confident it's going to expire, or are they confident it's a real alternative, possibly to 2035? Okay. There will be, Ben pointed out that, we looked at a record of, 4 or 5 years worth of flows. And the worst case scenario in that period was about $69,000 of an annual payment. But there could be an extremely wet year that would make that amount more. I think it's a reasonable perspective, but it could be more than $69,000 a year. But it's in the vicinity of that. This TRMI, typical residential monthly increase. This is what the typical residential user here in New London, what would have to happen to their bill to fund that annual payment. It would go up about a month. Then we looked at the costs. These are big numbers. We looked at the cost of these holistic alternatives. Remind everyone, number 4 is add filtration and upgrade everything but your solids, your digestion complex, really. So number 4 is add filtration and do a major upgrade to your existing facility. 5.1 is build you a new liquid treatment train and biosolids train that makes a Class B liquid. 6.1 would add the biosolids drawing. Okay, this is looking at the annual cost implications here from an O&M perspective. The reason these go down for these alternatives is because it's more efficient. It's a more efficient biosolids program. This total present worth, that's something that the DNR makes us look at. We have to look at that. It's a 20-year present worth. What that means, it kind of levels the playing field between alternatives. That's how much money would you need in the bank today to build and operate that facility for the next 20 years. Okay, how much money would need to be in an investment vehicle today to build and operate the facility for the next 20 years? Rarely do people make decisions based on that. I'm going to get to what really should govern decisions, the costs that should govern decisions, and that is, what are the implications to the ratepayer? I'll get to that in a second, but here are the capital costs. This is the construction cost. This is the capital cost. Why are we, are we being kind of mealy-mouthed and by presenting a range? We're very early on. We haven't started design at all, and I think it's important to, at this early juncture, there are thousands of decisions that'll be made, and a lot of other factors, bidding environment, things like that, that will determine what this ultimately costs. So I think it's appropriate at this early stage to present it as range. The high is intended to be, and we don't play the game where we give good news and then we, know you're going to have some cost surprises along the way. That's just a terrible way to exist. We don't want any cost surprises, so the high is intended to be the ceiling level cost, okay? Where it's intended to be the ceiling. The midpoint is intended to represent the most probable. And so we've kind of focused our attention on that midpoint number. When we run our rate cases, we use the midpoint. We would look at that as the most probable. The low cost, the only way you're going to land the project at the low cost is if you make every decision in the context of cost. In other words, you make the cheap decision all along the way. And so I'd love to say that those are something that you could plan on, but I don't think that'd be an honest way to look at it. I think the thing to zero in on is this midpoint cost. It's the most probable number. We talked about, and I think it's always important, so look at how big those numbers are, tens of millions of dollars. It's natural to say, why don't we just build a new plant outside of town? We wanted to provide that perspective. Invariably, everybody wants to know that when they have an old facility. And sometimes people decide to do it, but in this case, it would add $20 to $25 million. Everything flows down here today. And you'd have to get all that flow to some other facility, buy a site, pump it out there, get a new outfall to the stream, and build a new administration building. It would add $20 to $25 million. So I think we provided that really as perspective, not any recommendation, unless the community felt it was important. From a wastewater treatment perspective, you've got you would have an expandable facility that can readily accommodate more stringent effluent limits. From a treatment perspective, there's no reason to build a new facility outside of town. It would have to come from other reasons inside the community. Does that make sense? Those were huge capital costs, enormous capital costs. But I think decisions like this are ultimately made on what is it going to mean to the typical residential user when they pay their bill. And that's what this is attempting to do, is provide that perspective. So here are the different alternatives. Let me back up. This top chart is showing typical residential monthly increases, TRMI, to fund the capital project with the Wisconsin Clean Water Fund. The Wisconsin Clean Water Fund is the way most communities fund their projects today. It's administered by, it's a state revolving fund administered by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And it's a subsidized program where they buy down the interest rate, and it's federally subsidized. It's a federal program that provides funding to buy down the interest rate and make these projects more affordable. As we sit here today, if you use the Wisconsin Clean Water Fund, the interest rate would be 1.32% if you used a 20-year term. It'd be 1.386% if you used a 30-year term. Most projects wouldn't be eligible for a 30-year term. This one would, because you're building a lot of new infrastructure, and the DNR says that makes sense. Most of the project value is still plenty good 30 years from now. You don't finance your refrigerator for 20 years, but 30 years, but you do your house. Same principle. And then the only money you would get from outside the service area with the Clean Water Fund is $1 million in principal forgiveness. You would get essentially $1 million grant through that program because there's a phosphorus component to it, okay? So not a lot of grant assistance is available with the Clean Water Fund. Another thing that we talk about in the report, but it's really important to understand, is these rates have to go in effect on day one. You open bids, you award the project, you don't have to have your rates, your full rate increase in effect when you award the project. You make your first principal and interest payment the May after the project is done. Okay, so you wouldn't have to have the rate increase in effect until May of 30. So most people that do big projects would ratchet in their rate increases. So you could have a rate increase in 20, as an example, 26, 27, 28, and 29. Okay, so it does give you some time to feather these in. Most communities that do that. Just went to a meeting a couple months ago. The Sun Prairie is moving ahead with a $60 million project there, and they're doing exactly that. They're ratcheting in their rates for the next 4 years. We look at that here. So we give you that type of information for the Clean Water Fund 2 different ways. Here is where the rate, this line represents the total rate increase to fund the project using the midpoint. This is the total rate increase. This is the ratcheted amount over 4 steps. These are round numbers. I didn't want to get the sense in here. So if the math doesn't work exactly, it's because of round off. But this is assuming, in other words, for this alternative, if you use the Clean Water Fund for alternative 5.1, you would increase the rates $15 a month over 4 years. So for example, 26 rates will go up $15 a month. 27, another 15, 28, another 15, and so on. Does that make sense? And you would.
Is that on the fixed side?
Pardon?
Is that on the fixed side?
Yeah, that's that would get to, you could do it on the fixed side. It's one way or another, you'd have to get to that revenue. So usually it's a blend of a little bit on fixed and the rest on use to get to this point here. And then if you took it out over 30 years, you can see the benefit of carrying it longer. Instead of a $58 increase, would be 42. Communities like New London that are eligible for rural development funding often choose rural development funding instead of the Clean Water Fund. Okay. You have something for me here? Or should I keep?
Nope, just,
Yeah, okay.
I'm just getting closer.
Okay, good. Communities like New London that meet the median household income requirement and conversations with USDA indicate that you would. Communities like New London tend to like to fund projects like this using rural development for 2 reasons. One, the interest rate is still very good. It'd be, as we sit here today, it's 2.5%. Okay. The other reason is you can carry your term up to 4 years. That helps quite a bit. And then finally, USDA Rural Development is a program aimed at helping, communities with median household incomes that suggest they need some help. So they have grant money available, more grant money than the Clean Water Fund does. And so we look at some scenarios where we consider the grant funding. And the goal of USDA RD, goal of rural development, the goal is to keep your is to keep your user rates to 1.5% of the median household. That's their goal. And to offer grant money that gets you there, okay? But there's a limit. You know, there's not an infinite amount of grant money. Next year's looking, so in previous years, it's been well funded and there was real grant money to be distributed. Next year it looks pretty good. Where it goes from there is probably a function of some of the bills they passed in Washington DC. But if the future is anything like the past, there could be real grant money that actually moves the needle for the ratepayers. And again, their goal is to get to a point where your median household income is 1.5%. The user rates are 1.5% of median household income. So what does that mean? Here in if you Google median household income for New London, you'll get a little different number than what USDA says. USDA is very prescriptive on exactly which median household income number they use. The number they have for you guys is here, 55,629. As we sit here today, the typical residential user pays about $36 a month in round numbers. RD would want to keep that at 1.5% of the number that they have. That would work out to about $69 a month. So they would try to keep your user rate below 33. They would try to keep the increase to $33 a month. There's a lot there. Does that make sense? They would try to keep you at $69 per month. 1.5%. Okay. If you got zero, what we're looking at here is if you took it out at 2.5% for 40 years, your total increase is shown in this line. That's your total monthly increase for a typical residential user. That's on this line. This is how it could be stepped in. Okay, so for 5.1, $10 a month, 1 year, $10 a month the next year for 4 years to get you there. What if USDA had grant money? We looked at that. That would be about an $8 a month increase for the next 4 years. Okay, to get you that $69 a month. For all, so we looked at this kind of backwards. 33 is the answer. Okay, that'd be at 1.5%. How much grant money would it take to get you to a $33 a month increase? Okay. With alternative 4, you probably wouldn't get any grant money, okay? Because you wouldn't go over that. You're right there at that $33 a month increase. But with alternative 5.1, you would need a $9.5 million grant to keep you at $33 a month. And that is in the realm of possible. In past years, it's possible that they could give you a grant of that size, okay? These other alternatives exceed the amount that's realistic, okay? Like for 6.2, you'd need a $28 million grant. I don't think USDA-RD has ever given out a grant that large in Wisconsin. So I don't know that that's realistic.
So 5.1 is which one? I'm sorry. So if we go 2 over and you said
I know, so
5.1, it's kind of.
So this is, yep. So 4 is upgrading, adding filtration and upgrading your existing facility. 5.1
it's
is
a
the
new
one
plant,
where you
yeah.
build a new plant without a dryer.
Yeah.
And 6.1 is a new plant with a dryer, okay? So this is in the realm of possible. And if you wanted a dry, if the community says, you know what, it's just a matter of time, we should just do the dryer, then you would still be, you know, and they had $9.5 million. They could give you the $9.5 million and the rest of the money would have to be made up by the ratepayers. The point of this is This is probably getting to the edge of what's practical. These others are not. We don't want to set any expectation that you're gonna get a $30 million grant.
So our 5.2 and 6.2, if we do it off-site, do the full thing off-site? Okay, thank you.
Yes. The 0.2 means move it away 4
Okay.
miles away.
Thank you.
I mean, ultimately, there's nothing we can do about this. It's coming.
You know, the phosphorus limit is coming. You own that problem. And then the age of the facility,
It's coming.
you own it, you know? And so you're either gonna do it as a, you know, as a major upgrade, or you're gonna do a piecemeal over time, but I think it's very easy to show that by the time you got done with all those upgrades, it cost you more. And you'd be in a perpetual state of rate increases and construction. And a lot of communities, when they get faced with this, they said, let's just pull the Band-Aid off fast, let's get it done, and let's move on and worry about other things in our community.
Not to mention all the unknowns. When you're in that
Yeah.
continual construction and you start running into all these things that come up, which they always do, it's just more and more costs that you're gonna face regardless.
These are issues that the community owns, unfortunately. And some of us are old enough to remember like 2.5%. Yeah, our interest rates have ratcheted up, but from a historical perspective, those are still really good interest rates. And we don't know what they'll be 8 years from now, but they're very good today. And some of us are old enough to remember mortgages at 13, 14%. Okay. 2.5% is free money from some of us that remember those days. So that's something else to consider, that waiting, to Robert's point, what's gonna happen to construction costs? What's gonna happen to interest rates? One thing we can say is nothing will be cheaper than it is today. That's with certainty. Another thing that I want to point out is it's easy to think, oh my God, if we went forward with one of these alternatives, we would have the highest rates in the state. It's easy to think that. That's just, these are numbers. But it's really not the case. It's kind of the fact of wastewater life is if you have low rates, it generally means you really haven't done a lot to upgrade your facility in years. So facilities do an upgrade and they move up on the scale to one of the more expensive ones. They move above the average. And then as time goes on, other communities do their upgrade, and there's kind of just this treadmill where, you know, you're above the average, and then you work your way down below the average. You know, and then 20, 40 years later, you're way back up. It's just kind of evolving treadmill of user rates. And there's some examples here. Mount Horeb, you know, they built not that long ago, built a new facility. They'll be looking at rates of about $75 a month. Deerfield, $75 a month. Reedsburg, I won't mention those guys. They got a bunch of USDA money. They're under construction right now, and they're $80 a month. In Jefferson, again, different economics and different drivers. But Jefferson has said they want a new facility outside of town, and they're contemplating $100 a month. So you would be above the average, but you would not be, you know, one of the highest in the state at some of these numbers. Don't get me wrong. I understand where New London is and its median household income. And this is a lot of money, but wastewater is expensive business.
So if you're gonna make a decision about which upgrade, at what point can you know what those dollars are gonna look like, or what loan is available, or what grant money is available? So do you have to make the decision and then know, and then go for it? So
The Clean Water Fund, the wastewater program hasn't run out of money. So there'll be money there. The interest rates, that changes quarterly. So those have been ratcheting up a little bit, but they're still less than 1.5%. So you can kind of go to the bank that the Clean Water Fund will be there for you. I think you can, more than likely USDA will be there as a loan alternative. What's available as a grant is uncertain at the moment. So that's, when I said at the beginning, we are gonna suggest we're not gonna suggest you make a final decision. We're gonna recommend you do some smart things to advance the ball. And what we're saying is, here's what the report says. Number one, get everybody out there, get you all out there, your elected officials to tour the facility and understand what's there. Number two, you conduct a public meeting. That's what this is. And then you submit the PCAP. And I suggest you guys, if staff is comfortable with it, I would suggest that the city submit it. It doesn't require council action. You're telling the DNR we're gonna have to do something and we're serious and we've looked at the alternatives and we've got a good plan moving forward. That's what the report says. You're not committing to anything. You're checking the regulatory box. This is a little aside. I think the PCAP is kind of silly. I don't know that they had to have that, but they did. I suggest you submit the report, but then when I said, let's start doing some smart things to continue to advance the ball, here's what we're suggesting. You discuss the MDV with the DNR, confirm your eligibility and how long it's likely to be available to you. Number two, you meet with USDA. Now, we've already had multiple conversations with them, but they would actually come here, they'd bring their loan people, they'd bring their engineer, they'd have a conference with you guys, and they would try do the best they can to nail down, what's the number one, confirm your eligibility. Number two, crystal ball to the best of their ability, what the grant picture might look like. Number three, they would put a roadmap together for you to say, okay, here's the things that you need to do to secure your rural development money. Okay, you game plan that. And then once, at some point, there'd be another meeting where we would maybe refine these alternatives in the context of what the funding situation looks like. And we would have another conversation where we would talk about these different alternatives, provide more information. This is a high level. I could sit here all night and talk about this stuff, and you guys, already gotten sick of this, but no doubt you'll want more conversations, more what ifs, more maybe refinement of some of these alternatives. So we would suggest that there be more conversation after you talk to the DNR and USDA, and then at some point you keep talking about this, getting your information. At some point, then you would select a preferred alternative, okay, the one that the community wants to advance forward, and you would then meet that next regulatory requirement. You make your decision. You would submit a final compliance alternative plan that has to be done by next June. Okay, I think that's too long. You'll be frustrated and spend more. But at some point in the near future, then you say, here's what we're going to do. You put the alternative, put the plan together, or the report together that tells you, how to make our decision. You proceed on with the subsequent steps. And I think I can just tell, I think everyone appreciates the fact that it'd be wise to keep moving and advance the ball, but that's my final thought. That it's real easy to think, well, this is a 2029 issue. We got lots of time. I think you'd regret not taking advantage of the time that you have. So thanks. I don't know how long that took, but it probably took longer than I intended. So appreciate everybody bearing with me. Happy to answer any questions.
Took longer to read it today.
What's that?
I read it today.
Oh, good Lord.
Anybody got any questions for Mike?
One of the things that we do some partnerships with other municipalities like Amro and things like that. And we're selecting, products and stuff like that. Hypothetically, if the community wants to decide to look at upgrade, the full system in step 6 or 5.1 or 6.1. obviously transporting sludge is going to be more difficult as we get farther along in the future, so that drying system, as expensive as it is, might be more attractive for future flexibility in what's coming down the pipe. Does this plan, allow us, or does it factor in any partnerships with area municipalities who are in the same boat? That we become like a mini regional drying facility for these things and help bring that cost down? Or does that just increase or does it keep the cost going up, that we're not gonna see a savings to the taxpayer or the ratepayers in that case?
That's a really good question, and it has come up other places. I think in the universe of good ideas, it's a really good idea. From a practical, real world point of view, it can be very challenging. So number one, on the technical side, all these, let's say there's 3 facilities that would benefit from this. Good idea. There's no question, there's economies of scale. So you got these 3 other facilities, and they can give you you're not really in charge of their material in their service area, but you bring in this material in and you become responsible for all challenges and regulatory challenges with that. That is often underappreciated. We work for this outfit called the West Central Wisconsin Regional Biosolids Facility. About 25, 30 years ago, I think 8 original communities went together and built a biosolids facility just for that purpose. And then it was a great idea, and a whole bunch of other people, and I think they got up to like 14 different communities came there. It was a real challenge to operate that facility because you get all these different products in there, and you have to mix them together and make this cocktail and create it. It's not an easy facility to run, and now we've seen River Falls has opted out, and some others are considering opting out because of some of those technical challenges. And then there's just the classic, you're not being fair to me, and that. And then on top of it, I think the only way New London would want to protect itself if there was some sort of long-term agreement. Getting a project like this off the ground in a community like New London is a challenge. Add 3 other communities so that you can go to the bank with that revenue stream. That requires a lot of runway to work with all those different communities. So I think it's a great economies of scale strategy that if there weren't politics and the length of time it takes to fight through them, could be a good strategy. But I have real concerns about your ability to get that consensus and go to the bank with them.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
To that point, if I went forward with one of these alternatives, maybe I knew I had some capacity in my back pocket. Maybe I'd make some sort of arrangement like, hey, when we can take it, kind of like Amro, when we can take it, we're gonna, and then you get the revenue, but you can also shut them off. And if they're good actors, everything's working great, it's great for everybody, but you have ultimate control. There's things that could be done to very cost effectively add this material. That's my mind.
Any further questions? If not, I guess that was a pretty hard pill to swallow, but you did a good job.
Thank you.
Enlighten what you can in a short period of time. I'm sure we'll have plenty more discussions on it. It's not something that's going to be decided in 5 minutes.
No, by no means. Yeah. That it's kind of like at some point the goal is to get to the acceptance stage. There's the anger stage, and there's the different stages. And if we keep talking about this, hopefully we find the right path, and everybody says there's consensus that what we're doing here is the right thing to do, and it takes a while. It takes a while to get there.
All right, thanks for your time, and I'm sure we'll hear plenty more from you in the
Thank you.
future. Next, approve and recommend the council development agreement amendment for Hunchkey subdivision. Robert?
So for this one here, The amendment has to do with asphalt thickness. Originally, when he did the first part of North Point, it was 3 inches of asphalt on North Point Drive right there. Now that they're expanding and they're moving over and want to develop this area that Chad's highlighting there. He wants to go with what was approved for North Point. However, we've switched more to 4 inches of asphalt as being the recommended thickness of asphalt. So what it comes down to is the developer would start with the 2.5 inches of binder, put that down and let that be the main travel service roadway until most of the development is completed, and then apply the 1.5 inch surface to that subdivision. Chad, do you want to jump in with the latest on that?
So Robert's right on that. Mr. Hansky was looking at doing what he did in the past. However, our standards for a better product, we would want the 4 inches instead of 3 inches. So we put together this draft development agreement based on that. We gave that to our city attorney. He looked at it. He nodded his head. We gave it to Mr. Hansky about that. He called me, Jeff Hansky called me about 2 hours ago. Said he's still looking at the numbers and still thinking about things. But he did mention that he would want to put some language in here regarding a sunset of when we're actually going to do it. In the current wording, we basically have it that we would put the top layer on, the surface layer on at our choosing. And our choosing would be after, most of the houses are built, because we don't want to, put it on the top layer and then all of a sudden we got all these concrete trucks coming in, banging up that top mat. But Jeff was saying, well, I'd probably want to see something in there saying that we're committing ourselves, not that we're going to do it in, 70 years, maybe when the road's already done, and then we got to rip it up and redo it anyway at our top layer. So Robert and I were talking, some of the other development agreements we've seen is that they put in a timeline of, say, 80% of the houses are built. That's when the top layer goes on. So most of the construction traffic has gone through, beat up that binder layer, and then we come back to the top layer at a later time. But Robert and I were just talking before the meeting. We thought maybe like that, around that 80% build would be a good timing for that. So that would probably be inserted here as well. But in the end, like Robert was talking about and how we got to this point, real quickly, his cost for that, if he did the 3 inches, would be about that $57,000 price point. To do the 4 inches, which would be the 2.5 base binder layer, 1.5 top surface layer, that comes up to a $78,000 price tag. So it's an increase to about $21,000. So to get a better product for us, we want to see that binder layer down now. So we propose that the binder layer goes down now, and then, like I said, we do the surface layer later on. So for Mr. Hansky to pay the same amount that he would have been doing at the 3 inches, we were saying, his original cost would have been about that $57,000. We're saying that, hey, Jeff, put down the binder layer, pay that cost about $45,000. The difference is in that $12,442. We would put that in escrow or some type of account on our end, and then later on, once we're ready, we would pay the difference. Today's dollars would be a difference of $21,000. Obviously, it's going to be ratcheted up if it's 5 years from now or whatever, 4 years from now. But we would want to see a better product with 4 inches instead of 3 inches. There. Does that make sense with the numbers and how we got to that point? So again, this would be an amendment to the development agreement that would go to council. I'm guessing we would throw in a clause in here yet about probably 80% that we would look at doing it probably a year after 80% is achieved. Any questions?
In other words, that amendment on there's gotta be in there before we can vote on it.
Was that?
That 80%'s gotta be in this before we can do anything with it.
That can be the recommendation of council. Council can change it at their timing anyway. This isn't the final. You're making the recommendation to council. So you can make a recommendation with this and adding the amendment. If Mr. Hanschke says, nope, I want 90%, completion, that can be brought to the council. The council can make that decision at that point in time when it's finalized. But you're making the recommendation with the information we have right now.
Any further questions? So assuming if we make a motion right now, we want to add in that 80% completion.
That would be our recommendation at this point, yes.
So I guess if there's no other discussion, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve this pending 80% completion date. Second.
Motion been made by Mr. Ritchie, second by Mr. Barrington. To approve and recommend the council agreement, development agreement amendment for the Hunchie subdivision, including the 80% completion. Which still we have to make sure that that's gonna work on the other end too. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, Robert. Director's report.
One service anniversary, Ivan Castor 4 years on June 14th. Oshkosh Street is progressing well. They actually got there today with all the string line to start prepping for curb. They, depending on weather, plan to start curb and gutter tomorrow. Do it tomorrow and Wednesday, have it finished up, then proceed with all the flat work. The PTS has moved to the south end because they're pretty much in a holding pattern right now, waiting for Washington Street intersection to open up. Or be able to shut it down, I should say. So they jumped ahead at a elevation point in the sanitary where they were able to start with a structure mid-block between Jennings and Pershing. And they will finish that run out of the main all the way to Pershing by Friday. At Friday, the word today was that school's over on Thursday, that Friday, that intersection will be shut down and they will immediately start in there because they're trying to get ahead, get out of that intersection. They said it would take probably a week and a half because they have a lot of things going on, and that's one of the deepest points of the dig. They'll be running right around 14 feet deep with the storm and dealing with those big structures. That intersection is going to be wide open. So they want to get completely out of that intersection with all elements before they continue with the sanitary to the south. In order for the base work to come in, get the base done, bring in the curb and gutter, finish that out, and then pave everything out all at once, all the way to the south side of Washington Street, hopefully by the beginning of July. That's the hope. And I also had on there that I have the RFP about 3/4 of the way done for the garbage collection. Hopefully I'll wrap that up in the next couple to get that out for some bids. And that's all I have. Yes, sir.
You're talking, trying to put in curb and gutter in the next 2 days. Aren't we supposed to get a storm
Yep.
tomorrow night?
I
They know
said
that?
providing.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, there were, but if they're prepped out, they'll put it down because it comes out fairly stiff, and if they know they have
I just saw
a good
them
hour or two,
tonight.
they'll get her down and cover the plastic.
Yeah, that'll create another, when you rip up that Washington Street intersection, that'll. But it's gotta be done.
Wow.
There's no way around it.
Will Beacon be open? Will the Beacon intersection be open when Washington Street is ripped up?
It's closed to through traffic. All intersections at this point are closed to through traffic. They are passable, but they are closed to through traffic.
I just want to know if I can get down there and deliver to work.
They are, it'll be tight during this time frame of, getting the road bed prepped and all the curbing and flat work done. There'll be a lot of equipment moving around, so that's why we have it listed as close to through traffic. But if there's, I'll leave it at that.
We can talk later.
Any further questions? See, you had on your notes about the garbage collection through,
Yes. Yep, I said that I'm 3/4 of the way through the RFP. I plan on trying to get that out in the next couple weeks.
your spare time.
Yep, I spent about 15 minutes in the office today.
Understandable,
It
understandable.
was a good Monday.
Guess if anybody comes up with any future agenda items, just let one of us know and we can always address that. The next Public Works meeting is June 30th at 5:15.
Any objection to that? I'd like to go with that date versus trying to fit it in after 4th of July weekend and then it's short to council on the 15th.
No troubles with that. I guess we can go. I guess nothing more. I'm looking for motion adjournment.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Barrington, second by Mr. Ritchie for adjournment. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.